It's been 4 great years on the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast, but we're beginning a new era of our conversation regarding psychosocial safety. In this episode, it will be just me, and I'll lay out some of the concepts my guests and I will be discussing going forward. That's up next on this episode of the Psychosocial Safety USA podcast. This is the Psychosocial Safety USA podcast. I'm Dr. I. David Daniels, occupational health and safety professional, researcher, and global thought leader in psychosocial safety. Across the country and around the world, many organizations are struggling because conditions inside them are working against the very human beings who keep them alive. Psychosocial safety remains aspirational in far too many places. In each episode, you'll hear about real experiences, the latest research, and practical strategies from experts that help organizations and the people inside them move closer to that aspiration. Psychosocial hazards are real and preventable. So let's get to work. Welcome to this episode of the Psychosocial Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Our goal for each episode is to increase awareness of the importance of psychosocial safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. Welcome to episode 172 of what was the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast, but we now have a new name, the Psychosocial Safety USA podcast. As this podcast moves forward, we'll continue our conversations about various aspects of workplace safety from a non-physical perspective. While we'll talk every now and then about the visible workplace hazards, the vast majority of our focus will be on aspects of work that people often cannot see but can feel. These discussions will center around a few really important anchor topics. If you've followed the podcast for a while, you've heard these before. If you're new, hit the subscribe button and join me on the journey. The first anchor topic is psychosocial hazards. Psychosocial hazards are the conditions of work that people perceive or experience as unfavorable, and are capable of causing damage. They are not individual weaknesses or personal sensitivity. They arise from the way work is designed, managed, and experienced. These hazards include things like excessive workload, low control, role conflict, bullying, discrimination, lack of support, organizational injustice, exclusion, and poor leadership behaviors. What makes them hazards is not their material form, but their impact on the mind of the exposed individual, which then influences behavior, decision-making, and ultimately health. Unlike physical hazards, psychosocial hazards operate through meaning, perception, and experience. When a person interprets a condition as threatening, unfair, demeaning, or overwhelming, the body activates its stress response. If that response is brief, the stress may resolve. But when the exposure is chronic, repeated, or intense, the stress response becomes sustained. This is when the connection to psychosocial harm becomes clear. Psychosocial hazards create the conditions that convert ordinary stress into distress, then into harm, then pain, and eventually trauma, the full psychosocial safety deterioration pathway. In other words, psychosocial hazards are the antecedents that trigger the internal stress response. Stress is the mechanism. Psychosocial harm is the outcome. And because these hazards are embedded in work systems, culture, leadership, and interpersonal dynamics, addressing them requires organizational, not individual solutions. Another anchor concept is psychological safety. It's one of those concepts that gets a lot of talk about it, but when you strip it down, it's really about one thing: whether people feel safe enough to be human while they work. At its core, psychological safety is the shared belief that people can speak up, ask questions, admit mistakes, challenge ideas, and express concerns without fear of embarrassment, punishment, or retaliation. It's not about comfort or agreement. It's about permission. Permission to show up authentically, to contribute fully, and to take interpersonal risks in service of the team's goals. When psychological safety is present, people engage more openly. They share information earlier. They collaborate more effectively. And they're willing to surface problems before those problems become crises. Innovation increases because people aren't wasting cognitive energy on self-protection. Leaders in psychologically safe environments tend to model curiosity, humility, transparency. They invite input, they acknowledge uncertainty, and they treat dissent as data rather than defiance. When psychological safety is absent, the opposite happens. People withdraw, they self-censor, they avoid risk, avoid conflict, and avoid visibility. The organization loses access to the very insights that would help it improve. And importantly, the absence of psychological safety doesn't just affect performance. It affects health. A psychologically unsafe environment is a psychosocial hazard in and of itself. It creates chronic vigilance, fear, and distress, which over time can lead to psychosocial harm. So psychological safety isn't a soft skill or a nice to have. It's a core condition for healthy, high-performing systems. It's the interpersonal climate that determines whether people can thrive, whether teams can learn, and whether organizations can adapt. And in the broader psychosocial safety ecosystem, psychological safety is the outcome, the lived experience that emerges when hazards are managed, risks are reduced, and people are treated with dignity and respect. Another anchor topic is the concept of psychological health and safety. That's the systemic ability of the workplace or the organization to protect people from psychosocial harm while supporting their mental, emotional, and social well-being. If psychological safety is the interpersonal climate, whether people feel safe to speak up, then psychological health and safety is the organizational infrastructure that ensures people are not exposed to conditions that cause harm in the first place. At its core, psychological health and safety is about the conditions of work, not the characteristics of the workers. It focuses on how workload, control, role clarity, leadership behavior, organizational justice, inclusion, interpersonal treatment, how things like this shape a person's internal experience. When these conditions are healthy, people have the capacity to cope, to recover, and to perform. When they are unhealthy, these create chronic stress, which over time translates into psychosocial harm. A psychologically healthy and safe environment is one where hazards are identified, risks are assessed, and controls are implemented with the same rigor as for physical hazards. It means leaders understand that disrespect, exclusion, bullying, excessive demands, and lack of autonomy are not soft issues. They're risk factors with measurable impacts on cognition, behavior, and physiology. It also means the organization has systems to report concerns, respond to harm, and continuously improve the conditions of work. When psychological health and safety is present, people experience predictability, fairness, dignity, and support. They can focus on their work rather than on self-protection. When it's absent, the body stays in a state of chronic vigilance, and ordinary stress becomes distress, then harm, then pain, and eventually it turns into trauma, the full psychosocial safety deterioration pathway again. So psychological health and safety is not a wellness program. It's not a perk. It's not an individual responsibility. It's a governance responsibility and a core organizational capability that determines whether people can thrive, whether teams can function, and whether the organization can sustain performance over time. The concept we'll talk a lot about in this podcast is the concept of psychosocial safety. Psychosocial safety is the organizational condition in which people are protected from exposure to psychosocial hazards and therefore do not experience preventable psychosocial harm. It's not a feeling. It's not a program. It's not an individual coping skill. It is a systemic property that results from how work is designed, how people are treated, and how leadership decisions shape the internal experience of those doing the work. When psychosocial safety is present, people can engage, contribute, and perform without being subjected to conditions that cause distress, harm, pain, or trauma. To understand psychosocial safety, it helps to see how it connects to the three related concepts: psychosocial hazards, psychological safety, and psychological health and safety. Again, psychosocial hazards are the antecedents, the conditions of work that people perceive or experience as unfavorable and capable of causing harm or threat or damage to them personally. These include, again, high workload, low control, bullying, exclusion, injustice, poor leadership, and other factors that activate the body's stress response. When exposure is chronic or intense, ordinary stress becomes distress, and distress becomes psychosocial harm. In this sense, psychosocial hazards are the raw material that psychosocial safety seeks to control. Psychological health and safety is the system, the organizational framework for identifying, assessing, and controlling psychosocial hazards. It is the governance, policy, and risk management infrastructure that ensures people are not exposed to harmful conditions. Just as physical health and safety protects people from physical hazards, psychological health and safety protects them from psychosocial hazards. It is the operational pathway through which psychosocial safety is created. Psychological safety, by contrast, is the experience, the interpersonal climate in which people feel able to speak up, ask questions, admit mistakes, and challenge ideas without fear of negative consequences. Psychological safety is not the same as psychosocial safety, but it is deeply influenced by it. When psychosocial hazards are controlled and psychological health and safety systems are strong, psychological safety becomes far more likely to emerge. So the relationship looks like this. Psychosocial hazards create the potential for harm. Psychological health and safety manages those hazards. Psychosocial safety is the condition achieved when hazards are controlled, and psychological safety is one of the positive outcomes people experience when psychosocial safety is present. Together, these concepts form a coherent ecosystem. Hazards, systems, conditions, experiences, all connected. And when organizations understand this sequence, they can move from reacting to harm toward preventing and building environments where people can truly thrive. In addition to these conversations with guests regarding their lived experience, research, and expertise in concepts that either contribute to or detract from psychosocial safety, I'll be sharing my thoughts about the variety of ways that people experience psychosocial safety, as well as the reasons and contributing factors to why they don't. In the coming episodes of the podcast, I'll be looking to find ways to connect with the community of people who care about this topic. When we bring people with different voices into the podcast, that's an important component of what the podcast is all about. We're doing more than adding variety. We're expanding the truth of the conversation. Psychosocial safety isn't a single discipline issue, and it isn't experienced the same way by every worker leader, or community. So when multiple voices show up, each one brings a different angle on the same reality, how the conditions of work shape people's lives. Some guests bring scientific or clinical expertise. Others bring organizational or policy experience. And some bring lived experience, the kind of insight you won't get from a textbook or data set. Those differences matter. They help listeners understand that psychosocial safety is not abstract theory. It is something that plays out in real workplaces, in real bodies, in real communities. When a researcher talks about mechanisms, and a worker talks about what it felt like, and a leader talks about what it took to change the system, the audience gets a fuller, more honest picture. It also reinforces what no single profession can lay claim to. No single profession owns this space. Psychosocial safety sits in the intersection of health, leadership, justice, culture, human dignity, and other concepts. And it takes multiple perspectives to illuminate all of that. Different voices also model the very thing we're trying to promote: shared responsibility. When people hear of the range of perspectives, they hear that this work belongs to all of us, not just safety professionals, not just HR, not just clinicians. And finally, diverse voices build trust. Leaders can hear themselves in the conversations. They can see that their experience is valid. They can see that their questions matter, and that there's a community of people working toward healthier, safer, and more humane workplaces. Though we'll tend to focus on guests from the United States, the fact is we're still a bit behind as a country in terms of legislation on psychosocial safety. However, an argument could be made that some of the leading research that's driving psychosocial safety's progress in other countries is actually from the United States. Honestly, we're going to try to get the best voices from wherever they are, as long as they have lived experience, research, or expertise in the topic. Especially when we're having conversation about the problem of psychosocially unsafe workplaces. There will be plenty of examples here in the land of the free and the home of the brave. This podcast works this way. What we're going to be doing is laying out a conversation about psychosocial safety over the foreseeable future. We're going to talk every now and then about topics that may sound like current events. But since we record these episodes in advance, we're not chasing headlines. We're not trying to cover the latest issue or the latest concern and give our expertise, give our background on it. We will, however, seek to talk about how these situations are affecting real people. Right now, we'll be focusing on 2 episodes a month, but I'm open to doing more episodes, but that is going to depend on you. As a matter of fact, I'd love to hear your ideas and thoughts about what these episodes should look like and who we should talk to. We are in the process of creating an opportunity for you to be able to connect to us with a specific email address and a website to be able to go to be able to share your feelings about where you think the podcast should go. Over the last 4 years, a lot of this has been more of a one-way conversation. We're certainly interested in it becoming more two-way for those who are out there really interested in this topic. The podcast itself is self-sponsored. Is offered free of charge to anyone who wants to listen. And I don't anticipate putting the podcast anywhere that will make it difficult to access. This is in many ways due to my belief that those experiencing the greatest exposure to psychosocial hazards, risks, and harm are likely those who lack the resources to escape the environment where the harm is occurring. So you won't see super complicated, really high cost, really difficult ways of accessing this information. A lot of this is about sharing it for those that really need it. and thinking about the times that I wish that there was someone that would have shared some of this information with me. So again, if you're struggling in a psychosocially unsafe environment, this podcast is for you. I'm not a therapist, but I hope that this conversation can be therapeutic. If you know someone who's in a work experience that is less than they want it to be, please pass the podcast along. Pass it on to people, share it with people, share it through your social media and such. That's how we're going to get the word out about what we're attempting to do here. So as we close this first episode of the newly renamed Psychosocial Safety USA podcast, I want to leave you with a few core ideas and thoughts that will guide our journey forward. Again, psychosocial safety isn't abstract. It's about the real conditions that shape how people think, feel, and function every day. As we discussed, psychosocial hazards are the conditions of work that people perceive or experience as unfavorable and capable of causing damage or threat to them. And those conditions influence everything from decision-making to health. We'll also explore, we have explored, and will continue to explore psychological safety and how it fits into the bigger picture, not as a perk or as a soft skill, but as the interpersonal climate that allows people to show up fully human at work. And we connect that to psychological health and safety, the organizational responsibility to ensure people aren't exposed to conditions that will cause harm in the first place. When these pieces work together, we create what this podcast is all about, psychosocial safety, the organizational condition in which people are protected from exposure to psychosocial hazards, and therefore do not experience preventable psychosocial harm. In the episodes ahead, you'll hear from researchers, leaders, workers, and people with lived experience. Different voices matter because psychosocial safety touches every discipline, every industry, and every community. And while our focus, again, will be in the United States, we'll bring in the best thinking from wherever it exists. As I said, this podcast is self-sponsored. If you're interested in sponsoring an episode in the future, certainly reach out to us, but we provide this free of charge to people who really are interested and who really need it. We want to make this information freely available because those affected by psychosocial hazards often have the fewest resources. So if you're, again, working in an environment that is psychosocially unsafe, I hope this space offers some clarity, some validation, and a sense of community. And if you know others that are experiencing that same type of dread, that same type of concern, that pit in their stomach before they go to work the next day, have them tune in. We'll be having some conversations that I'm hopeful will lift some of that stress and strain. Thank you for joining me for the first step into a deeper, more honest conversation about the conditions of work and the dignity of people. I'm Dr. I. David Daniels. I look forward to continuing this journey with you on the Psychosocial Safety USA podcast. Thanks for joining this episode of the Psychosocial Safety USA podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast with others who are committed to building safer workplaces. To catch up on previous episodes, visit our website at psychosocialsafetyusa.com or on YouTube at Psychosocial Safety USA Podcast. You can also follow my work on Substack at Dr. I. David D. If you have questions, suggestions for future guests, or would like to share your own workplace experiences, send an email to info@psychosocialsafetyusa.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Psychosocial Safety USA podcast.